Welcome back to Mustached Paranormal. Today, we dive into the chilling case of the Donovan family investigation by none other than the renowned paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Prepare yourselves for a terrifying journey into the realm of a diabolical haunting. Let's uncover the spine-tingling events that unfolded in West Hartford, Connecticut in 1974. Join us as we explore the gripping tale of a family's encounter with the otherworldly. But before we unravel the haunting mysteries, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated with our latest paranormal investigations and stories. Now, let's embark on this bone-chilling journey into the world of Ed and Lorraine Warren and their terrifying encounter with the Donovan family.
The Warrens Case Files, the Donovan Family. In 1974, the Donovan family, from West Hartford, Connecticut, began experiencing unexplainable events in their home. They experienced what Ed Warren claimed to be the most intense case of diabolical attack that he and Lorraine had ever encountered. It all began with the Donovan's daughter. At 19 years old, Patty Donovan had few friends and her parents were very strict and religious, and they kept a tight rein on both her and her brother Brian. Needless to say, she was very lonely and decided to use a Ouija board to communicate with the hopes of making a friend. She took hold of the planchette and asked if anyone was there or if there were any spirits that could hear her. The planchette quickly moved up to yes. This started a year-long relationship with the spirit. Night after night, Patty would spend hours talking to the spirit, and it played on her vanities, telling her how pretty she looked, and that she was prettier than the other girls, and even how she should wear her hair. Eventually it began telling her that it would love to marry her, but after a while Patty began asking it questions, and it would tell her stories about its death and how lonely it was until it met her. This all pulled Patty in deeper, and she began referring to it as him and believed that he was a teenage boy. Her infatuation continued to grow. However, one night she asked it for its name and it refused to answer, giving an excuse saying, "I must never reveal my name to a living person, or else be forced to return to the mists." In February of 1974, she asked the entity to tell her future. It gave her the birth date of her first child, that she would have 3 kids by 1978, all of which would prove to be true. March 2, 1974, she asked the entity to manifest. She wanted to see her boyfriend. The next morning, Ted Donovan, Patty's father, tried to start his car. It wouldn't start. Lifting the hood, he saw that it was because the spark plug wires were pulled out, rubber hoses unfastened, and the fan belt was cut. Patty's car wouldn't start either. The local garage said the internal engine parts had been disassembled. That week the back doorbell was torn out of its housing, shrubs were ripped out of the ground, and a 6-foot cast iron pipe on the roof was bent at a 90-degree angle. March 8 was the first flat tire on Patty's car. No sooner did it get fixed than it got another flat. It looked as if it were stabbed with a knife. Patty couldn't raise her ghostly boyfriend. The planchette just kept going to goodbye. Ted called the police, but of course that didn't do any good. Ted and his wife were questioning their son Brian about the vandalism when they heard a loud bang from inside the house. They found an 18-inch hole in the wall in Brian's room. The jagged edges were pointing inward, indicating it was done from inside the house. That night they heard scratching in the wall. Ted could not find a reason why. The noises continued all week. Patty had 3 flats by now. They bought new tires. They parked it in a locked garage, and the tire was cut the next morning. The third week they began hearing loud pounding on the walls, sharp jarring raps, and it sounded like boards being ripped off the wall. The weekend of March 20th and 21st, the pressure valves on the radiators became unscrewed. Ted wanted to blame the kids, but they weren't home. He screwed them back on and they came right back off. The banging became more frequent, so Ted spent a whole day looking for the problem. No answer. He called in a guy to look at the furnace. He heard the pounding as well. After 19 hours, he said it wasn't the furnace. A plumber came and changed the pressure valves, but he would immediately find them back on the floor. He told the Donovans that they had a problem, but it wasn't with the plumbing. And at the end of the day, another of Patty's tires were slashed. March 31st, another tire was slashed. That made 6. About 10 p.m. that night, the Donovans were watching TV in their bedroom, the quietest room in the house. The lights went off and on 3 times, then the TV shut off. A 6-foot-long, 250-pound dresser levitated off the floor and started twisting back and forth. It set down and the doors started slamming. Then a chair loaded with clothes levitated, flipped over and dumped the clothes. The pictures lifted from their hooks and floated in a circle around the room. Later they heard a kitten which then turned into a baby. They did not check it out. There were poundings on the outside the house and on the roof. On April Fool's Day it rained rocks on the house. The stones fell for an hour, witnessed by the police, who told them to call a priest. After the sun went down, objects began levitating in full view of everyone. They would drop on the floor, slam against the wall and even hurl themselves at the people. Ted called a priest. When the priest arrived, all activity stopped. The priest said that someone in the house was disturbed. Ted went to work later that day. He explained to his supervisor why he was missing work. His supervisor gave him the Warrens' name. Ted unpacked a plaster statue of Saint Anne. He immediately heard a ruckus and found the recreation room furniture levitating, as well as laundry soaps, which were spilling on the floor. He went upstairs and the statue was missing. He later found it next to the toilet. He found obscenities written on Brian's door in pencil. Ted flew into a rage, only calming down when Brian broke into tears. No one could sleep, because of the continuous commotion. They left to stay in a hotel, only to find out there was no escape. Lights switched on and off and then the pounding started up in the hotel. The next morning the Donovans returned to their room after breakfast to find the room trashed. The manager said neighbors were complaining about the kids banging on the walls. Ted said it wouldn't happen again, but it did. They were forced home. On April 6, when they returned home, their house was destroyed. Rugs and beds were drenched with spilled fluids, cleaning fluids, liquor, shoe polish, cologne and perfume. Towels stuffed in toilets, all furniture was knocked over or broken, and blasphemy scribbled on the walls. It took all day to clean. On April 7th, which was Palm Sunday, Ted's brother Phil brought his family over. They told Phil what was happening. Strangely, nothing happened for a while. Phil started showing slides from a recent vacation, including shots from Holy Land, a roadside attraction. When a slide came up depicting religious symbolism, they found water flowing out of the cellar wall. The next day Ted went to the monastery that bordered his property. Ted explained the problem and the monk agreed to come to his house. The monk explained that they were being oppressed by a demonic spirit and got the Warrens' number for Ted. Ted called and was told the Warrens were out west and due back in 5 days. Rocks continued to rain down on the house throughout the week, some embedding in the roof, some vanishing when they hit the ground. Crucifixes were turned upside down, pictures of saints were torn up, and the saint and statue was constantly being hidden. One of the box springs of the beds was thrown against the wall covering a picture of Jesus. Twice the refrigerator was moved to the middle of the kitchen, accompanied by a hellish moan. Ted found his anvil in the deep freezer and his heavy steel toolbox in the attic. There seemed to be a physical presence in the home, and Ellen even turned to see a black mass standing behind her. The Donovans' only hope seemed to be the Warrens. Ted Donovan finally got in touch with the Warrens. He recited his tale to Lorraine. At first she thought his imagination had run wild, but by the time he finished his tale she was sure his home was under demonic siege. She told him they would be there the next day. When the Warrens arrived they found stones littering the yard, but the house looked placid. Inside they saw the damage, and Lorraine sensed the presence of entities so numerous and malevolent that she had to fight not to leave. Ted walked them through the house reciting at least a dozen incidents in each room. When the tour was over, Ed began to conduct his customary interview, asking what may have caused this. When it first began, is anyone seeing a psychiatrist? Did they purchase antique furniture or has anyone used a Ouija board? Patty replied yes. They asked if the spirit told her its name, which of course it did not. The Warrens both agreed that something needed to be done. Ed telephoned Father Jason, who arrived just after sunset. The activity already had started. To test it, Ed pounded on the wall twice. He received 2 pounds in return. He then rapped 4 times. In response, it rapped 4 times on the table and then the floor. Ed asked Father Jason to perform a blessing in each room. That reduced the power and frequency of the blows. The Warrens were leaving for Maine that night. Father Jason would stay with the family. During the next few days, activity continued as usual. The Wednesday of Easter weekend, the demonic entity showed its defiance of the priest. If Father Jason asked for a pencil or glass of water, it would float over to him. Sometimes he didn't even say it out loud and it would be on its way. That night no one could sleep because of the evil permeating the home. Thursday, the Warrens returned to find an ashen and shaken Father Jason. He left and the Warrens stayed with the Donovans. The screams and pounding and rapping made Ed question whether the home would handle the assault without falling in on itself. That night the family said a black figure materialized in their room. The double bed levitated with 3 of the Donovans sitting on it. The dresser rolled across the room at Ed, all after he challenged the entity. At this time Brian was with Lorraine. He levitated off the bed and was thrown 5 feet into a wall. Knowing an exorcism was the only chance to save these people, the Warrens began compiling data and doing personality interviews. The Exorcist the movie had recently been released, so the church was reluctant to act. Ed interviewed Ted first. He was the most affected. He couldn't handle the idea the devil was in his home. Ellen was next. She questioned why God would let this happen. Brian was a tough read, but he would definitely need counseling. Patty showed a range of emotions: hostility, indifference, lashing out. Ed thought she was primed for possession. One item in a demonic haunting that is off limits to the demon are rosary beads. Only the strongest and most menacing entities will touch them. Ed was speaking with Father Jason on the phone. Father Jason watched hid rosary beads float out of his room, make a left down the hall and then another left into the kitchen. There they wrapped around a kitchen chair in a gesture of strangulation. Ed told Father Jason to get himself and the family out of the home. The Donovans went to stay with Ted's parents. While at his parents' house the spiritual assault continued. Plumbing was ripped out of the wall and the banging continued. Objects levitated throughout the house. Father Jason was affected as well. He saw a dark mass blocking his way to his room. The same mass would keep him prisoner in his room at night. While shaving, the light turned off, disassembled, and the parts were set on the sink. On Thursday, April 25th, the Warrens returned to dedicate their time to the case. The Warrens met Father Jason at a local restaurant. The Donovans were nowhere to be found, but they had given Father Jason a spare key. When they got to the Donovan house, Ed went in first. The house was trashed. Furniture strewn about. A repulsive smell. All fluids were dumped everywhere. Beds were flipped. The refrigerator contents were dumped on the floor with the plates and silverware dumped on top of it. Halfway down the hall, Ed realized something was wrong. The house began to rumble and shake, but Ed couldn't move to get out. Father Jason and Lorraine realized something was wrong and tried to find Ed. He stumbled into the room with 2 long gashes in the form of the cross on his arm. He was cut in the arm when he put his arms up to protect his face. Realizing that this case had become a confrontation, they realized that they had no alternative but to fight it. If they did not, the Donovans were most likely going to die, and these entities would torment the Warrens and Father Jason for life. About noon on April 25th, the drained Donovans arrived home to the disaster and immediately began to despair. But a collective effort between everyone put the house in a semblance of order and lifted their spirits. April 26th, the Warrens helped Father Jason with the paperwork to present to the church. The date of the exorcism was Thursday, May 2nd. In the meantime, the Warrens stayed with the Donovans. Metal picture frames smoldered and caught on fire. Scarves, towels and linens burst into flames and were flung at people, causing painful burns. Furniture was appearing in different rooms and then reappearing in the right room. Ed told the Donovans how much he liked their car. The next morning, the spark plug wires were tied in knots and the carburetor's hoses were pulled loose and dangling. The activity intensified as the exorcism came closer. The night before, sleep was impossible. About 10:30 that night, they saw a bright light in the living room doorway. They watched as the form of an older woman materialized from the waist up. Lorraine told Ed to back up because it wasn't human. 2 chairs tumbled toward Ed and pinned him against the wall. He made the sign of the cross and both chairs dropped. At 9:30 in the morning the exorcist arrived. Father Rourke and Ed had worked together once before. Ed felt fairly certain there were several lesser inhuman spirits and an incubus were present, as well as a higher diabolical intelligence, a devil. Before beginning the ritual, Father Rourke blessed everyone there. Father Rourke confronted Patty. He asked if she willed this upon her family. She shot back in anger that she didn't, then more calmly told him she did not intend for this to happen. He asked if she asked the Lord for forgiveness. Father Rourke started the exorcism. As he conducted the exorcism, Ellen saw something materializing by the fireplace. Its head was horned, it had cloven feet and a tail. The temperature in the room dropped to freezing. Father Rourke cast holy water on it and it immediately disappeared, only to be replaced by a blood-red face of a devil on the carpet. Again it had the menacing horns. It looked up at them with absolute hate. Father Rourke swung the aspergillum filled with holy water at the face. It slowly faded and left a pink outline on the floor. The exorcist said the sign of departure had been made. He said a prayer to wrap up the exorcism. This is a documented case of a diabolical attack. It lasted 60 days. Ted's brother wrote a statement that Ed kept in his records. It stated, "I, nor anyone else in my family, have ever before witnessed or actually experienced anything so weird and terrifying. I am sure the impact of the obscure experience shall remain with my frightened children and wife indefinitely. The incomprehensible predicament that we have witnessed leaves our frightened family group in bewilderment. At least for the present time, it defies all rational and logical explanations. All the tangible evidence and facts related to the preternatural mysteriousness of those events witnessed by our family group should be laid bare and then rationally reviewed by competent people who are experienced in these weird and perplexing matters. When and if a review is completed, I firmly believe that the ultimate conclusions will eventually suggest that unearthly powers or influences were at work." Philip Donovan. After the exorcism, the Donovans' life returned to normal. The damage was not covered by the insurance. They refused to cover acts of God. Brian went on to college. Patty got married, and of course had 3 children. The Donovans still live in the home. No further activity had ever taken place.
And that concludes our spine-chilling journey into the Donovan family investigation by Ed and Lorraine Warren. We hope you enjoyed this look into the world of paranormal phenomena. If you want more hair-raising content like this, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts on this bone-chilling case. Stay tuned for our next thrilling adventure. Until then, remember to keep your senses sharp and your courage intact in the face of the unknown. This is Mustached Paranormal, signing off.